I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our techniques we use for striper fishing here in the waters of Rhode Island. But striped bass are probably the most numerous fish in our waters, so if you're a charter captain, you better be good at catching them. And luckily, because there's so many of them, it's not the hardest thing to do. We'll give you a couple of techniques, a couple of rigs that we use, how we use them. Probably the most simple technique, which is lead core or wire line. Now we use wire line or lead core line because the boat is really the one that hooks the fish, and it's also a very consistent way to catch fish. If a charter client doesn't have tremendous fish ability, all they need to do is crank this thing in once we hook it. We have 3 shots of wire on here, each 100 feet. At 3.2 knots, 100 feet is 10 feet down. If you're going faster than that, it comes up. If you go slower than that, it drops. As the captain, I watch the depth finder. I find the fish at a certain level. It's up to me to drop it in that zone because our water clarity isn't great, so they'll bite. Typically, one with an umbrella rig on it. That clip here is here so we can quickly change to a different umbrella rig or a tube and worm or some other type of plug if we want to. But typically, umbrella rigs work very, very well. This rod was my father's. It's a very old lammy stick, and it's got tremendous action for this jig. This is an Andrews parachute jig. You can use Magic Tail, you can use Mojo Jig. This jig, we top with a pork rind, we drop it back 100, 200, 300 feet, depending on the depth we want at 3.2 knots, and we snap wire. And you move that jig and you make it have a rush forward, and that really gets the instinct of the striper going, and they'll rush up and grab it. The hits on this are tremendous. Typically you drop back and you just whoop, and you set that hook. It's unbelievable. Caught my first 50-pounder on this jig right here. Now we're gonna move into eel fishing. Great technique for catching big fish. So we've got a leader, and what's the length of the leader? Well, how big a fish you want to catch? That's the question. I don't think I've ever seen a striper bigger than 55 inches with my own 2 eyes. So we make them about 60 inches. And that's 30-pound fluorocarbon during the day with a 4.0 Gamakatsu circle hook. Thin wire. Again, this is daytime. The fish have very good eyes. They'll see a thicker wire hook. They'll see a thicker leader. If you put 50 or 80 or 100-pound test leader, you're not gonna catch. The trick with this is to get the eel to go down, because stripers are called rockfish in the South for a reason. They're down on the bottom. So it's really, how is your eel acting? If it's not acting well, you gotta stun it or something so it'll get down to the bottom. Stripers are on the bottom. If you're not catching bottom, you're not catching stripers. So the trick is to let enough line out so these things are as close to the bottom as possible. You feel the striper pick up and you simply reel because it's a circle hook. You never set the hook. So when you're fishing with the circle hook, you just reel. You don't Jimmy Houston, set the hook. You just reel. Now, if we get into 40, 50 feet of depth, we gotta force the eel to get down to the bottom. I got a 3/4 ounce egg sinker here. It's on monofilament. So there's a top shot of about 100 feet of 20-pound monofilament. Why do we use monofilament? Because braid frays much easier than mono. So with this sinker on there and a big striper, if it gets twisted and you're on braid, you're cut off. So we put a top shot of monofilament, again, 30-pound fluorocarbon, 60 inches, and a 4.0 Gamakatsu hook. This will get your eel down to depth. We usually keep it in free spool, so we use a bait runner. Count to about a 3 count to a 5 count before we simply reel. Again, you don't set the hook on a circle hook. There's none of this. It's just reel down and load that rod, and that hook should slip right into the corner of the fish's mouth, and that's your best position to capture that fish, because if there's leader in the mouth, 30-pound, it'll fray. Goodbye striper. So if somebody has casting ability, which a lot of people don't, but it's okay, we teach a lot of people how to cast. There's a lot of surface action in Rhode Island. Some great feeds. We typically use these type, we call them dildo poppers, okay? Folks, don't get too excited. They're deadly. You can get into shallow water, 6, 8, 10, 12 feet. They'll come right off the bottom and they'll smash these things. We do what's called walking the dog. Sorry, Jack. But we walk the dog across the surface. They can't deny it. So it's also a fun, active way to pursue striped fish. And if you're wondering why striped bass are so prolific in Rhode Island, is we have this great bay here with a lot of estuaries, a lot of rivers, and therefore a lot of bait fish come here to spawn, and then you get this. You get a lot of bait fish in the water. These are silver sides. We've got peanut bunker in here, and these fish are just gorging on the new life that's coming out of our wonderful estuaries here in Rhode Island.